Hello and welcome to Dedicated Improvement and Reflection Time. And the main objective we have with this particular DIRT session is how can I use the source and my own knowledge to answer exam style questions. Well, the very first thing we should do with any exam question is decode the question, work out what exactly is the question asking me. So let's have a look. It says study source C, so we're going to be using source C to answer this question. Why was this source, so source C, why was source C published at that time? So published, created at that time. So why was source C created at that time? Well, obviously we need to look at what time it was created. So we'll have a look. Source C, here it is down the bottom. Source C, a cartoon by James Gilray published in 1802 for the Anti-Vaccine Society. So why was Source C published in 1802? Well, we've got to use both the source and our own knowledge to answer this question and explain our answer. So both the source and our own knowledge. Let's start by having a look at the source. So what can we see in the source? Well, probably the most obvious things that we can see in the source are, first of all, there's lots of cows coming out of people's bodies. And probably the second most obvious thing we can see in the source is this man here who seems to be cutting a woman. And the third most obvious thing that we can see in the cartoon has got to be the bit at the bottom here where it says that this was created for the Anti-Vaccine Society. So we've started by thinking about the source. What does it show us? Well, it shows people with cows coming out of their body parts. You can see there, you can see on a man's hand as well. It shows a man who's cutting a woman on her arm. And also it shows us that it was created by the Anti-Vaccine Society. So we've started by thinking about what the source shows us. And that's the kind of thing you need to do in your answer. So you need to start by saying something along the lines of, the source shows, and you're going to start by saying something that the source shows you. So it could be the source shows lots of people with cows growing out of their bodies so we've used a little bit of the source there. We said that the source shows lots of people with cows growing out of their bodies. Okay. What's the next thing that we can see in the source? Well, we said something else we see is the source also shows a man cutting a woman's arm with a knife. And finally we said that we could see the source was published by the Anti-Vaccine Society. So we've started by using the source in our answer. We said that the source shows that lots of people with cows growing out of their bodies. We said the source shows a man cutting a woman's arm with a knife, and the source was published by the Anti-Vaccine Society. So we've used the source, but we also need to use our own knowledge So we're going to then take the second step now and use our own knowledge to explain why these things were published in 1802. So the source shows lots of people with cows growing out of their bodies. This image was published in 1802 because no one understood why infecting people with cowpox could prevent smallpox. And they thought it was a mad idea. So you've used the source and you've used your own knowledge here. You said the source shows lots of people with cows growing out of their bodies, and that this image was published in 1802 because no one understood why infecting people with cowpox could prevent smallpox, and they thought it was a mad idea. Okay, well the next thing that we've talked about is that the source shows a man cutting a woman's arm with a knife. We need to explain, using our own knowledge, why this source would show that. Well, this image shows Jenner, the man who invented vaccination in the late 18th century. And why does it show him doing these things and infecting these crazy people? Or did people trust him? No. In the 1802, people still thought he was a country doctor and that he didn't know what he was talking about. People didn't trust Jenner's methods. As they thought he was an unknown country doctor and he couldn't explain why his vaccine worked. Okay, and finally, we've said that this source was published by the Anti-Vaccine Society. So now we need to use our own knowledge to explain why the Anti-Vaccine Society in 1802 would be publishing this source. Well, the Anti-Vaccine Society were publishing sources like this cartoon in 1802 to put people off vaccination. A lot of doctors were losing customers who had previously paid lots of money to be inoculated. To Jenner's vaccinations. They didn't want to lose that money. And you know this isn't the only reason people are anti-vaccine, so what other reasons do you know about that would explain why they're trying to put people off with these images? Well, you could also talk about another reason people joined the anti-vaccine society is some people died after having vaccines. In 1802, people thought this was because Jenner's vaccine didn't work. We know now it was because some doctors were using the same knives for vaccination and inoculation. And accidentally and unknowingly infecting patients with smallpox. So there we are. You have talked about things that the source showed you, and for each one of those points you used some own knowledge to explain why in 1802 this would be being shown. So the source shows people with cows growing out of their bodies because in 1802 no one understood why infecting people with cowpox would prevent smallpox. They didn't understand why the vaccine worked. You've talked about the fact that the source shows a man cutting a woman's arm with a knife, and that this is being shown in 1802 because Jenner had invented vaccination recently in 1796 at the end of the 18th century, and lots of people didn't trust Jenner's methods as they thought he was a country doctor and he couldn't explain why his things worked. And you've also explained that the source shows it was published by the Anti-Vaccine Society, and that this source would be published by the Anti-Vaccine Society at the time because lots of doctors were losing customers because they'd previously got money from inoculation, and vaccination had prevented them from doing that. And that another reason why the Anti-Vaccine Society was around at this time is some people appeared to be dying of this vaccine. And people thought it was because it didn't work, although we now know it's because they're using the same knives for vaccination and inoculation and accidentally infecting people. So in this question, if you wrote this sort of an answer, where you say something the source shows and used your own knowledge to explain why it would show this at that time, you'd be getting yourself 7 marks out of 7. Have a go at writing your own answer to this question.